Hello everybody. I am just doing a quick live stream, or probably what will be a fairly quick live stream here, just to see if my audio my audio is straightened out. I was on a live stream hosted by Reverend 20 Piece, and my audio was crap, like people couldn't even hear what I was saying, so just wanted to sort of get on here and see if I can stream now. I think I know what the cause of the situation was, but I kind of have to make sure that there's not something else going on. So if anybody listens to this and comments on it, that would be great. If you could say something in the chat. If my audio is good, then I'll do a short stream here, but this is just one of those little things where basically I want to see whether everything's working properly again or not. Like I said, Timmy Kramer 2000 says everything sounds great. That's good, man. I appreciate that. I think what happened was I was sort of waiting for the live stream with Reverend 20 Piece to start, and I was just streaming stuff on the internet, or browsing, I should say, stuff on the internet, and no, it wasn't porn. I didn't wear my computer out with porn, but I did kind of, like, this is an older laptop, and I've noticed sometimes it'll do that, like computers tend to do, where it'll get sluggish after a while, especially if it's kind of the fan's running high and it's running hot to some extent. And I noticed before I joined the stream that, like, it was taking a moment for things to pop up, like even checking my speaker sound volume level and all that. Like, I'd click it and it would take 2 or 3 seconds for it to come up. So I should have taken that as a sign that, hey, you need to restart the computer, or maybe shut it down for a few minutes before the stream, and kind of let it reset itself. But I think, I brought up the stream and I thought, well, as long as it can open up the window and I can join the stream, everything will probably be all right with it once it gets set up. And it wasn't. I think that was kind of the reason for my audio being so messed up, that my laptop just wasn't running the program properly, right? To put it in very simple terms. So hopefully I don't have a problem like that. That's just kind of my own dumb fault. Like, I think it was totally on my end. I know Reverend 20 Piece was having some trouble at the beginning of the stream. Not sure what the cause of that was, but I don't think that had to do with my audio issues. I think that was totally on my end. But it's good that it's working now. That pretty much tells me that my laptop just needed a break, basically, or at least needed restarted before I could effectively join the stream and actually contribute and participate. But I did have an idea for a topic that I wanted to talk about as well. Not really a major topic or issue, but something good, something that I could put on this video. Like I say, I mainly got on here to make sure that I could stream and have the audio work properly. But one thing that I've noticed with sort of people that'll challenge your position on different issues, or they'll try to essentially they'll try to beat you in an argument, right? They want to essentially put you in a poor position that you can't defend, whether it's MGTOW and saying, well, if you're MGTOW, you hate women, something of that nature, right? Or whether it's this stuff with the coronavirus. I should probably try to censor that, but I'm not going to. I'll just, that's what it is. For people with the corona non-compliant stuff, right? Like I don't want to get vaccinated or something like that. They'll say, well, you're an anti-vaxxer if you don't take the corona shot. So you have those kinds of arguments where people, and this is kind of a form of what you'd call a straw man argument, where someone takes your position or your point of view and they try to turn it into something else, and then they attack that instead because they can't really attack your actual argument or your actual position very well. And so they come up with some sort of counterfeit version of your position. They take out the hard part that they can't argue against, and they turn it into something that's easier for them to attack, right? This is kind of a form of that. But basically, the conclusion that I've reached, it's not that complicated, but I hadn't really thought about this, is that you really don't have to defend anything other than your own point of view, your own position. It's not your job to defend, for example, what every MGTOW guy thinks, or what everybody that's not getting vaccinated with the coronavirus stuff. It's not your job to defend whatever point of view that they may have that might be different than yours. Your job, or if you're going to argue or have even just a discussion with someone where there might be differences of opinion on some things and maybe not on other things, your job is simply to defend your own point of view. And so what I do anymore, and like I say, this is a newer thing for me, is when someone says, well, you just hate women, it's like, no, I knew this one MGTOW guy and he just hated women. Well, that's not me. That's how you have to handle that, I think, is when people try to do that, it's kind of a red flag that they don't really want to have a reasonable, sort of intelligent or informed conversation with you about those issues anyway. But honestly, it's not something that you have to defend against, right? It's like, no, this is what I think. And if you disagree with what I think or with my view on an issue, then we can discuss it. But I don't hate women. So whether this other MGTOW guy or whether, a significant minority of men that say that they're MGTOW hate women, that I don't care. That's not my responsibility to defend their point of view. I don't hate women, so why is it up to me to try to defend that position or that viewpoint? Same thing with the vaccinations. It's like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. I think that vaccines in general have been a good thing, that, we've cured polio, we've cured tuberculosis, we've cured, measles. These are all good things, but that has very little to do with an experimental drug that has not been put through the same stringent process that vaccines are supposed to go through in order to be approved, right? And so let's have a conversation about this specific disease and these specific vaccines and the very particular situation going on because of this whole virus stuff. Not, oh, I'm an anti-vaxxer. No, I'm not. Well, this person over here or a lot of these other people, they're anti-vaxxers and they won't get, I don't care. Right? That's you can't allow yourself to get trapped into that, because, like I say, it's kind of a form of a straw man argument of, well, I can't deal with your actual arguments, so I'm going to try to pretend that you believe this or associate you with that. And it's like, no. Oh, you voted for Trump. You must be a white supreme, or, you must be crazy and on the fringe, and you must think that the last election was totally stolen and Trump really no, I don't believe any of that. Thank you. You can deal with my point of view on things, or we can not have a discussion about it. That to me is it's definitely the sort of wiser, not that I think that I'm wise, I don't, but that's definitely the smarter way of going about it. Trying to defend random other people that may have some similar beliefs to you, trying to defend their positions on things, that's not your job, right? Especially if you are red-pilled, so to speak, on sort of just a variety of issues, and you think as an individual. That's probably the better way of putting it. You think for yourself as an individual. You don't need to defend other people's points of view. only if you agree with it and you have the same position, essentially, does it make sense to try to defend that. Timmy Kramer says, thank God for MGTOW and men standing up for themselves. Yep. It's great to have that sort of set of knowledge and information out there, at least online for now, until there's a way to... I don't think you can completely censor it from the internet, of course, but until there's a way to make it to where it's not as easily accessible on the internet. But yeah, this information, that we can share through a MGTOW sort of perspective or lens is really good. But like I say, just as an example, people will say, well, you must hate women if you're MGTOW, or you can't get no woman, you can't get laid, that's why we know what a lot of these arguments are. I'm actually going to do a video here in the near future about sort of some of the common anti-MGTOW arguments you see and just why they don't really add up, right? Why they're not really very valid. What's up, Polska Bob? Polska Bob says, sorry I'm late, I was watching Pop's stream. Yeah, I just did this sort of to check my audio because of the really lack of any sort of audio that was working on Reverend 20 Pieces last stream. I basically didn't get to participate in that stream for the most part because my audio didn't work, but I'm just, I got on here to kind of see whether it was functioning now, and talk about what I was mentioning, that basically there seems to be this sort of form of straw man argument that you have to defend other people's positions, right? That, well, if you're MGTOW, I met this one MGTOW that hated women, so you have to defend against the idea of MGTOW being hateful toward women. It's like, no, I don't. All I have to do is describe my own point of view, right? And why it is that marriage doesn't make sense, why it is that, for men today, why it is that having kids that can be so easily taken away from you doesn't make sense. I don't have to defend what any man's particular reasons for choosing to walk away from that arrangement is. I don't have to defend against any of that. I just have to know where I stand. And, if someone continues to say, well, you must hate women, or you can't, not to argue with that person because they're full of it, right? They're not really willing to have a discussion about it or any sort of reasonable debate. So Polska Bob says, sounds great. That was a great stream. Yeah, the Veterans Day stream with Reverend 20 Piece and Pop was on that stream, and Hammerhand and One Fast Dak and Rebel Against Defeat. Yeah, they all I really wanted to listen to what they had to say, because even though I was invited to the stream, I'm not a veteran. I have family members that are, but I didn't feel like really I wanted to comment on a whole lot anyway. But then when I tried to, my audio didn't work. So Polska Bob says, we don't hate women, we're much worse, we don't care, we're indifferent. That's right. That's where I bumped my table. That's where most men stand, most MGTOW guys stand on that issue. Is, we realize that investing or trying to build a life with a woman and just doesn't have any sort of benefit. The game is rigged against men so much that it's not worth playing. But I'm not going to pretend that there aren't guys that say they're MGTOW or agree with MGTOW or are MGTOW that hate women. There are some, whether it's 10%, 5%, I don't know, 15%, that actually do hate women because they're in the red pill rage stage of the whole experience, or maybe they've always hated women and now MGTOW is a convenient way for them to sort of justify that. I'm not going to pretend like those men don't exist. I just don't care, right? I don't need to defend that position and say, well, it's about, this idea that marriage is just bad for men and all that. I mean, once someone makes that sort of argument and tries to make you defend it, they kind of have already gotten the upper hand on you. That's what I've kind of learned from the past with those sort of those people that want to say, well, you must think this and that. No, here's what I actually think. Do you want to have a discussion about that, or do you want to try to pretend like it's something else? You kind of have to let them decide at that point. But, you can apply this to a lot of different things, where someone will say, well, you must think this and that, and it's just not true. I've had it with even sort of the capital punishment and abortion issue, right? If you're on the right or conservative, what a lot of leftists will do is they'll say, well, you're all for, taking a woman's abortion rights away, right? You're all for a pro-life position. You think that if a woman's carrying a child, even if she's poor, impoverished, that she should have to have that baby. But then you're all for capital punishment, right? You're all for the death penalty, and you're probably a hypocrite. And it's like, no, I don't believe in the death penalty. Sorry. Like that takes that away, right? It's like, no, I actually don't support that. I don't think the government should be putting people to death because I don't trust the government to do that right. Oops, now you don't have the right, you don't have the ability to make that straw man argument and say, well, this must be what I think, and now I'm a hypocrite for believing that life is valuable in infancy, but then it's not valuable later on. You can still, of course, justify the position, right? It's like if you believe in the death penalty because someone makes a certain choice and that they killed somebody else or whatnot, that's not the same as an innocent infant that hasn't done anything wrong to anybody. But I don't even need to get into that, right? I don't need to defend that point of view because that's not my position in the first place, right? You can come up with a lot of examples like that, but I've noticed that it's very tempting to kind of get into these sort of arguments where you're defending other people's positions, or you're defending a position that you feel like, it embodies what most people who have some similar beliefs to yours, it embodies what they think, right? It represents their position, but if you don't share that point of view, you have no reason to actually give a crap. And if someone wants to deal with you based on your own personal beliefs and the thinking you've done for yourself, that's where they need to be, right? Then you can have a discussion with them. But otherwise, it's just like, no, I don't need to defend that. I don't care. I don't care whether these guys that say that they're red-pilled, but then they advocate for a bunch of things like PUA tactics, or they do all kinds of stuff. Women will do that as well, right? They'll say, well, you're part of the red pill community, so you must be about using game to hurt women. It's like, no, I don't care about any of that. No, I'm not interested, right? These are my views here. I reject marriage. I reject having kids, or the idea of even trying to build a life with a woman, because it's not tenable. It's not something you can actually attain. It's not something that you can effectively do because of where we're at in our culture and in our our legal system and everything else. So you can challenge that, and I can just point to the divorce rate and who it is that files for divorce the vast majority of the time. I can talk about who pays child support and who gets custody, right? I can talk about how biased the family law courts are, and you can try to prove that that's wrong, but most likely people like that, they're just going to say, well, you must hate women and stuff, right? They're going to go back to that original attempt to argue about something that doesn't even involve what you actually believe. Eddie MGTOW says, yo, what's up, Eddie MGTOW? She should take birth control if she's poor. Big Daddy government covers it even if she's broke poor. Yep. Well, women, yeah, they do. They have several ways, obviously, to not get pregnant. So, right, they have all the reproductive power, and men have no reproductive rights, essentially. So, again, that's another that's another reason I put that out there as an example, just with abortion and how people will make assumptions that you must be one of these conservatives that's not consistent with your view on life and stuff like that. And it's just, no, I don't agree with the death penalty. Sorry, right? I think that abortion is generally bad. It's generally wrong. It shouldn't be legal for convenience sake, right? I don't believe that in every case that, like in cases where a woman actually didn't consent to the sex, where she should be forced to have that child. I don't believe in that, but I do believe that, yeah, the government shouldn't be putting people to death, and with the death penalty, and I also don't agree with abortion, right? I think that life should be considered a value, human life. But they'll try to get you. They'll try to pin you to something that you don't even believe in a lot of cases. And like I say, in the past, I've kind of fallen for that to some extent. It's like, oh, well, I need to defend this point of view now. No, you don't, right? And if they're trying to get you to talk about things that have nothing to do with your beliefs, then you know where that conversation's headed, right? You know that most likely, if you can't force them to say, well, no, we're going to talk about what you believe and what I believe. We're not going to talk about what other MGTOW guys or other people on the right politically or whatever. That's irrelevant, right? It's just, I can't defend someone else's point of view that I don't agree with. I mean, I could, but that's the whole trap, right? So that's just something I've learned. Polska Bob says, that's why your vid on difference is one of the best out there. On indifference is one of the best out there. Thank you, Polska Bob. The emotional argument, that's their go-to. Yeah, it is, but it's also a strategy, right? It's like if they can get you to try to defend something, right? It can be an emotional argument in the sense that they just get mad and try to throw whatever they can at you. But it's also a strategy that someone that doesn't want to be intellectually honest can use, right? It's like, well, I'm going to make you defend this point of view, or I'm going to make this assumption about you. And it's like, if you don't cut that off, then you can go down that path of having to waste your time defending a view that you may not even have, or that you don't care about, that's not relevant to a particular issue. Eddie MGTOW says it's just utterly pointless. Yeah, a lot of the time it can be to argue with people that try to use these sort of tactics. Polska Bob says you've won the argument once they go there. Yeah, or again, you just can't have the argument, right? It's just they're not willing to have a discussion with you about, well, what do you believe? I'm interested in your thoughts here. That's not what it is if they're trying to put you in a category that you don't even belong in, or that, again, like I say, it's like you may share certain beliefs, right? You might believe that the MGTOW philosophy is the best philosophy for a man today, and some other guy that truly hates women might think that too, but it's whether he hates women or not, it's not the point. That's the kind of thing about that it saves you the time and effort where you either try to make that person deal with the issue at hand, or they can go away, right? Like, you're not wasting your time on those people anymore. That's the bigger benefit for yourself. Is like, hey, we can talk about the issues and concerns that MGTOW guys have and why they're really walking away from the system. But if you're just going to say, oh, we just can't get laid or something like that, it's like, no, I don't need to defend my ability or anybody else's ability to get laid, because that doesn't have anything to do with it. You might have a particular guy that would have been considered an incel, but he realized that MGTOW was a better path forward, and maybe he can't, quote, get laid, but who cares? That didn't have anything to do with the overall reasons for going your own way, right? But you can get trapped in one of those kinds of arguments pretty easily. Eddie MGTOW says you could take a look at the situation objectively and decide it for yourself. Nope, not worth it. Whoever disagrees, tell them to get the GFY. End of discussion. Yeah. GFY, get the fuck. I don't know what Y stands for, but I assume that that's basically what it means. Sorry, I'm not up on all the internet slang sometimes. But yeah, it's just, it is, I know what you're saying. It's one of those things where you can try to still debate the person, but if they're not willing to have a conversation about, okay, this is an issue that has nothing to do with it. Here's my position. If you can't get them to come back to, and it's not that they can't bring up things that are relevant, right? If they want to challenge your facts or challenge the evidence based on the actual issue, then that's fair game. But if they try to involve things that have nothing to do with your position, it's just like, no, I don't believe that. Sorry. And then they can come back to your point or not, but if they're not willing to, then it's just a waste of time to argue with them. Pulse Kebab says they bring you back to emotion, discussion over, you have one walk away. Yep. Yeah, like I say, emotion, or, trying to throw whatever they can at you because they're getting emotional is one thing, but there is also the sort of, someone can be non-emotional with it and still try to sidetrack you, right? They can still try to say, well, you must think this or that. It's sort of, it sounds like it's an emotional argument, but it can also just be a logical fallacy that they're using on purpose, right? Because they can't actually deal with what you're saying, or they're not willing to have an actual discussion about it. Brian Banner says, Ohio Dan the man. Welcome, Brian. This is not really going to be a long stream. Like I say, the main purpose of this was to make sure my audio is going to work for streaming in the future. But seems like it's doing all right, so that's good. Pulse Kebab also says GFY. And like I say, I'm not sure what that stands for. Sorry. Eddie MGTOW says that was the end of it. Brian Banner says y'all ain't robots. It's okay to have emotions. Right, but we were talking specifically about the idea of, well, if you're having an argument with somebody and then they decide to just get pissed off with you, basically, then that means you're not going to be able to really have a discussion about whatever issue, whether it's feminism and MGTOW or the coronavirus stuff and whatnot. Once you start making emotional arguments, then it's really hard to have a conversation with someone about those things. That's where the emotion topic came in there. Redman Mind says, hey, I've been watching some of your videos. I was actually going to comment on that last video, Red Man Mind. Red Mind Man. I'm sorry, I can't get my words straight. About what you were discussing with the sort of collapse of society and how it's not going to happen all at once. I left a comment on that, but one thing I didn't mention was that I wanted to actually ask you was, have you heard of The Fall of Empire from Sir John Glubb? Because he wrote an essay that it's not really incredibly long, but it's about kind of what you discussed, where you have this long, slow collapse typically when an empire starts that sort of phase of its decline. And there have been some other works done kind of based on Glubb's essay where I think it's the fate of empires, not the fall, if I remember right now. I'd have to look it up. But that's basically, it talks about that kind of thing where people don't realize they're in the collapse stage a lot of the time of their empire. It's just Red Red Mind Man says, I've heard of it, but I've never read it. Yeah, it's kind of, it pertains to some of what you said in your last video about the collapse is not something that happens all at once. There's usually a long, slow decline, and then there's oftentimes a really it's like a sudden event at the end, and people say, well, that's the date that the empire collapsed. Well, sort of, but a lot of the time it reaches that point over a long period before something happens that kind of gives that knockout punch. The one difference today, the biggest difference, is sort of the level of globalization that we have now has been different in the past. But pretty much every empire, no matter how you define what an empire is, like a hegemony, where one nation basically has a lot of power throughout the world, or at least throughout its region, they only tend to last about 250 years. And after that point, there's kind of a long decline, or there can be something that provides that knockout punch. But a lot of the time, there is that sort of long process where people think everything's great. The Roman Empire went through something called the crisis of the 3rd century in the early 3rd century AD, and they kind of came back from that to some extent, and everybody thought, well, Rome is going to live forever. Rome's the eternal city. It didn't, right? It just kind of continued to decline after that. They just barely survived that situation at the beginning of the 3rd century, but the Roman Empire officially dragged on for over 200 years after that. But they were a shadow of their former self. And I think that that's kind of the path that the United States is probably going to take. Let me catch up on some of the comments here. Polska Bob says, can you link it? Are you talking about Red Mind Man's last video? Because I probably can link that on there. Or he can if he wants to. Eddie Migtow says the collapse takes time. Rome was on a downward spiral for at least 2 centuries. Yeah, probably more than that. Like I said, it went on. The Roman Empire existed for... What was the official year that it fell? Was it 426 or something like that, AD? I don't think that's right. Now I'm curious. That's something that I should have in my memory, but I don't. Let's see here. 476 AD. Romulus Augustus was the last official emperor. But, it was just a remnant of its former self at that point. So, people don't have that sort of context, I think, a lot of the time to put our current state of affairs in our country. And they don't realize what's happening, that we're pretty much already in that kind of collapse situation. It's just that we don't realize, oh, wait a second, the United States still exists, and we must still be the, preeminent power in the world, but we're kind of losing that power pretty quickly. It's just that people can be in denial about it for a long period of time until all of a sudden it hits like a ton of bricks for some reason, whether that's an invasion from an outside force. Right now, that kind of looks unlikely. Or whether it just falls apart internally, which is looking more likely, in my opinion. Our days are numbered. We may go on for several decades or even a century more, but I don't think we're ever going to be like the United States was back in the 50s. We're never going to have that sort of dominance, or even, shortly after the Cold War to some extent in the 90s, where we were the only world superpower. That, we're gonna be surpassed, whether it's by China or somebody else, right? I don't think that we're ever going to get back to that point. I think we're pretty much in a decline phase that's just going to go on until our society falls apart completely. I hate to be that pessimistic about it, but Brian Banner says, I mean, you aren't wrong, especially in the context of debate, but I also think the one who has emotions loses is a bit of a logical fallacy. Well, that's true until you put that as the basis for your argument, right? You can have emotions, but you got to separate that from the logic and the sort of substance of what you're saying, in my opinion. That's how I take that, right? I mean, you can have emotions, but when you start making an argument that's just based on, well, I don't like you because you think this way, then that's when you end up failing. And people, do that all the time today. Women more often than men, but like I say, the whole issue that I was talking about was basically that whether someone's being emotional or they're just purposely trying to use a logical fallacy, it's not up to you to defend a position that you don't have, right? It doesn't matter whether other people, just to restate what I was saying earlier, it doesn't matter whether other people may have some of your beliefs, but then they have these other beliefs that you don't really have. It's like, I don't need to defend MGTOW that may hate women. I don't need to get people that are anti-vaxxers and they're all into the, vaccines cause autism type of stuff. No, I'm not going to make a comment on that. I don't really think that I've not seen evidence to convince me of that personally. But people will try to make you defend those kinds of arguments rather than, no, we're talking about the coronavirus. We're talking about vaccines that have not been tested over a long period of time. We're not talking about the polio vaccine. We're not talking about being an anti-vaxxer, right? We're talking about, here's where it stands, challenge me. How is it that these vaccines have been thoroughly tested? How is it that I should get the vaccine when someone my age has basically no chance, next to nothing, right? Very, very low chance, it seems, at least, based on all the evidence I've seen, right? There's a 1 in maybe 1,000 chance that I could die from the coronavirus if I get it. And maybe I'm unlucky enough that I'd be that 1 out of 1,000, right? Maybe that could happen, but it's very unlikely. So why should I get vaccinated for this? There's no one else left to protect. This whole idea of protecting other people doesn't make sense when other people can get vaccinated. So a lot of the time what people will do is they'll say, well, you're just an anti-vaxxer, or you just don't believe in science. No, I agree with the scientific, or I find the scientific method to be quite useful. Thank you. I do like science. Sorry. You're not going to be able to use that with me. And so I think a lot of the time, that's kind of the proper response, is you make people deal with the issue and you just tell them, no, that's not what I think. And then they look bad, right? Because they're trying to assert something that you've just, well, no, that's not true. Rather than you trying to defend the idea of being an anti-vaxxer, or trying to defend the idea of, well, I do care about other people and I want to protect others and all. No, it's not about that. Right? You have to stick with the arguments at hand and the beliefs that I actually have about things, rather than what you want to say that I believe. I think that's important to realize when people are using that tactic against you. Let's see. Eddie MGTOW says, I definitely think we're past the point of no return as well. Family has been largely destroyed. That's a big reason why. Yeah, their family structure is gone, so there's no incentive for men to really get married and have kids, because it's pretty much the woman is the de facto head of the household. You have our national debt. That itself is something that I don't think that we can turn around, right? You can look at what the government is spending now, right? Oh, how many trillions of dollars should we spend on infrastructure? Which you need to have solid infrastructure, but on top of everything else, I mean, there's just, the printing presses are open, right? It's like, we don't have this money, and inflation's already through the roof. So we're seeing the effects of all this already, and it's just, that's a big one. You can talk about one that I discuss a lot is cultural Marxism, right? This whole idea of, well, this group of people is a victim group, and this other group of people is the oppressors. And of course, men's the biggest oppressor category that there is, according to the leftist, general narrative that you hear today. And it's like, that leads to nowhere good. Every country that has embraced Marxism has collapsed, right? And it looks like that's what we're in the process of doing, right? It's not about whether you're a good person or not. It's about what race or gender or sexual orientation or whatever that you are. And that's not going to work, right? That's a form of Marxism, dividing people up into those classes or categories. That's another thing that's not sustainable. You can come up with a pretty good list of things that could easily doom this society, and no one's doing jack shit about actually fixing it. So, a lot of people wanted Trump to try to fix some of this stuff, and really it didn't work, right? So I agree. I think that we're past the point of no return in terms of fixing this society in general. Chaz Reinhold says, "Greetings, Ohio Dan. Good to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in, Chaz. I'm way behind on these comments in terms of time, but Reverend 20p says, Yo, Dan, just got here. No YouTube notification as usual. Well, I didn't put out a notification for this because I kind of wanted to see whether my audio was even going to work properly or not. Because after my audio not working at all in your last stream there, kind of just wanted to see where I was at on that. So I didn't put out any notification. Unless it's just like you go live and YouTube shows that you're live or whatever, but I didn't put out anything ahead of time. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's on me, not on YouTube, because I didn't put out a notification. Eddie Bigtow says, one of the telltale signs of collapse is men not defending the ladies anymore. Have you guys seen the Ingram video about it? No, I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, I mean, there's no incentive to. I don't know about that. I think there have been societies where men defended women, but not to the level of simping, right? Not to the level of necessarily being like white knights. Men defended the women that they had in their families, right? And in their tribe. I think some of this stuff comes from chivalrous ideas about how to protect women, but that's really only been the case since, like, I want to say the late Middle Ages. Maybe it goes back further in the Middle Ages than that, but all the sort of stories of knights protecting women and saving ladies and all that. I don't know that that's been the case throughout human history, though, where, before that point where men felt like they had to defend women all the time. I think when you limit it to like women in your family, that might be true. But I don't know if there was this sort of let's defend all women stuff in previous civilizations before that or not, to be honest. I'm not sure. Eddie Migtow says it's become blatantly clear they are losing that, especially in the big liberal cities. Let's see here. Yeah, it's just a mess. Like, there's just so many problems. I'm not sure exactly what statement that was that you were replying to there, Eddie Migtow, but there's just so many problems with things that are unsustainable, things that aren't going to be fixed. The spending, the general sort of lack of family structure. It's just a mess, and it's worse in the liberal cities. I think you were probably referring to one of those things. So let me see if I can find that video that you wanted a link to Pulse Kebab. Sorry, I'm kind of slow today in terms of answering the comments and sort of being consistent with some of the stuff that I'm saying. Let's see, what other comments do we have here? I'm going to get that link up there to Red Mind Man's video that I was talking about. Toop toop, I'm way behind on the comments. Terminator T800 says hello, Dan. What's up, Terminator? Eddie MGTOW says it was sacked in the middle of the 5th century Rome. I think that the sack by the Goths was earlier than that. And basically from that point on, Rome, or even slightly before that, like Rome was vulnerable. The Roman Empire technically existed, but they became more and more just sort of at the whim of what the Germanic tribes wanted them to do. I find that time in history to be pretty interesting. A lot of the stuff that went down when it became clear to everyone that the Roman Empire wasn't going to be able to sort of mediate peace anymore, or, you know, not that the Roman Empire didn't start a lot of wars itself, but they weren't going to be a power anymore, right? There was going to be a huge power vacuum, and a lot of the stuff that happened at that time was, you know, it's pretty sort of pertinent to what we have going on today. It's hard to tell. You can really have long discussions, I think, about what you could predict for the United States and Europe and stuff like that. Because, again, for a lot of us, we're realizing that we're kind of in the collapse, or you know, we're on the fringe of being in that situation. And like I say, you could easily make the case that we are already in that situation. Let's see here. There, I posted the link to Red Mind Man's video that I was referring to. I don't think he'll mind putting that in there, putting that on the chat there. Eddie MGTOW says, I believe either the Vandals or the Lombards did the final knockout. Well, the official, what happened in 476, I think, was that they just deposed the emperor, right? The emperor was like a kid, that Romulus Augustus, and they just, like, the Germanic king, I don't know whether he was, I think he may have been a Lombard king, I'm not sure. But he just, you know, he just said, oh, I'm king now, basically. And there is no more emperor. You know, he just got basically deposed. But the emperor became kind of like a puppet. The last several emperors were puppets to the Germanic tribes a lot. So even though the empire technically existed, it's like it wasn't the Roman Empire anymore. Like, only in name was it the Roman Empire. One Fast Dak, hey brothers. Hey, I saw all that snow you had up there, man. Just like every other winter, I'm glad I'm not up in Canada. Ohio gets its pretty good share of winter as well, but sometimes it does. Sometimes we actually don't get that much snow, and then sometimes it snows a lot and it's cold the whole winter. So nothing like up there in Canada, though. Brian Banner says empire building inevitably fails. Yeah, and like I say, there seems to be kind of an expiration date on how long an empire can last. Reverend 20 Piece is really the one that kind of showed me some of the material about that, and I agree that that's pretty much the case, right? You can build an empire, right? Empires have existed throughout history, but eventually corruption and other things take hold, and you can discuss what actually happens, but eventually it falls apart. And in our country, and in the West in general, you can talk about gynocentrism, feminism, you can talk about the debt, you can talk about a lot of stuff, but eventually it reaches a point like where I think we're at now, where really there's no fixing the problems that you have. Pulse Kebab says universal suffrage, one generation later comes welfare, then collapse down the road. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things that lead to that. I think universal suffrage is bad because it comes down to the whole two wolves and a sheep decide on what's for dinner, and they vote. What happens? What do they vote on? What's for dinner? Like, what's the result of their little three electorate voting? Well, they're going to decide that the sheep's for dinner, right? That's the problem with democracy and universal suffrage. I agree that's not what this country was supposed to be. I think that you should have to meet certain criteria in order to vote. But there are many different ways that a nation can come undone, or an empire, or whatever you want to call it, right? There are many ways that it can come undone. I do agree that universal suffrage is bad. That's a really politically incorrect thing to say. Not that stops me on anything else, but people love to talk about democracy, but in my opinion, this country, there's a huge difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic. And I prefer the constitutional republic. It's not really what we have now, unfortunately. Solitude is profit, says greeting gents. Greeting gentles. What's up, Solitude? See, Eddie Migtow says to have a strong, functioning civilization, it takes a simple equation. For ladies to fulfill their end of expectations, and for men to be builders and defenders. Yeah, that's a lot of it, right? That's what a lot of the basics come down to. It says once the ladies give up their part, it's not long after for the fall. Yeah, I think that's just one path to collapse, though. I think that there are a multitude of bad decisions, of course, that you can make, right? When men and women don't have an incentive to get together anymore, because in this case, because men don't benefit from that anymore. But whenever you're not sustaining your population and families aren't growing up with, two parents in a stable environment, you're screwed, right? That's one very sort of straightforward way for things to go downhill. I think the elites, of course, have pushed this because they think it's their opportunity. They're going to replace the family with themselves, right? They're going to replace a mother and a father, or, having two parents with themselves. But the problem is that their totalitarian dream is only going to last for a short period of time, because if people are going to be that messed up, okay, you're going to lose replacement population rates like we already have. You're going to lose people that want to invest in the system, right? It's just like like I mentioned before with Marxism. Like, they're trying to use Marxist tactics, in my opinion, to basically take everyone's rights away. But once you do that, people aren't going to have an incentive to care anymore, and that's the way every sort of Marxist civilization falls. So there's a lot of things you could say about that. in terms of basically in terms of different paths to failure. But yeah, definitely men and women not having an incentive to have families together is one of the main ones. The massive debt, not that that's unrelated, right? But you could have massive debt even with men in charge. There's just a lot of different paths toward that sort of decline and eventual collapse. Pulse Kebab says there's been constant live stream tonight. Hamster Pop, and now you, Dan. Yeah, like I say, I didn't really sort of evaluate who else was doing live streams today. It just happened to be that way. The Rev says, but Dan, it's to protect the children. I'm sorry, man. I don't remember what that comment was pertaining to. I'm so far behind on the comments. I'm trying to kind of catch up here. Solitude is profit says, it's all about control. Yep. Pretty much what we're seeing is about, those that already have wealth and power in this society trying to control everybody else as completely as they can. Elihu Youngblood says, I think he means, is this Rome 2.0? Yep, probably. I mean, not everything is literally going to be the same about it. Our level of technology and sort of how integrated the world is might make it actually worse when our society goes down. But I don't know. I think we're headed toward another dark age, like after Rome collapsed. To answer that, I think we're headed toward a very similar conclusion. See, Matt Tyre says, Ohio. Yep, I'm still here. Red Mind Man says, I don't mind at all. Thanks for the support, guys. Yeah, I thought I might share that video. Pulse Kebab was asking to see if I could provide a link for that, so... Let's see here. Pulse Kebab says, shit, last year we had 4 feet of snow here in Chicago. Yeah. That's your lake effect. Cleveland's about the same way. I do not live in the part of Ohio that really has the lake effect snow, though. I don't want to be super detailed where I'm at, but because of that, I get far less snow than that on average in my area. Let's see. Solitude is Prophet says, I'm going to subscribe to all your channels. Thank you, I appreciate that. Pulse Kebab says, government is Latin for mind control, govern control, meant minds. That's what it means. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is another topic, I guess, now that you mention government and control and all that, it really is a sad situation that we're in terms of having any sort of useful dialogue about some of the other stuff we're dealing with, like whether it's the virus or feminism and women's issues and all this stuff, or the election and how much fraud was there, and the media taking, Biden's side and being so anti-Trump throughout his presidency. I've only really fully accepted how bad it is recently, in the sense that the information is so controlled by so few people. Like, in other words, the message is, if you're not a leftist, you're a bad person. If you're not a leftist, you're anti-science. If you're not a leftist, you're retarded. Oh, I'm not even supposed to use that word anymore. That's the R word. It's just the education system and the media and the information that the government itself puts out there is so controlled that even the internet, it's like, I've noticed that if you do a Google search on something controversial, something basic but controversial, feminism, MGTOW, cultural Marxism, and you just do a regular search and you look at the first few pages, all of it is leftist propaganda. Seriously, it's all bullshit. It's like, it'll just say, MGTOW guys are bad. Feminism's just about equality. Cultural Marxism doesn't exist. It's a right-wing conspiracy theory. And it's like, really? Then why are you constantly talking about how black people are always victims, or women are always being victimized by men, and you need to do more for LGBTQ, and these people that don't go along with it, they're bad? And why is that always your news story 24/7 if cultural Marxism doesn't exist? It's easy to observe that even if you're on the left, if you can think objectively, it's like, these things clearly exist. Like, there's no, you can debate it, obviously, but there's no question in my mind that these things exist. And it's like, feminism's not about equality, and MGTOW is not about men hating women, or men that, are just rejecting women because they can't get any. It's about a real sort of assessment of what's going on in our society, right? It's about things that are actually happening, that are observable, that are measurable. And yet all you'll get is stuff like, oh, you hate women if you... It's just like, even the internet is incredibly, like, the searches that you do and everything, it's incredibly biased for the left and against conservatives or against people on the right. And it's just like, I've really come to see that information has been very, very well controlled by the elites as much as they can, right? There's a lot of stuff still on the internet that doesn't sort of that doesn't correlate with this necessarily, that will give a different perspective. But a lot of it is just propaganda. Like, the amount of propaganda out there is just how dominant it is with the media and the education system and even online. It's just sad, right? It's just, I don't think that's why so many people are asleep. I don't think that it can be overcome. I think that the elites have pretty much locked down a lot of the control, and unless, like I say, the internet is still sort of the wild card. But even it, if you do a basic Google search on things, they've managed to make it to where you're only going to see what the leftist side of things really is. Like, if you put anything about coronavirus, not getting vaccinated, all it's going to be is, well, these are anti-vaxxers and these people are against science and all this. It's like, everything, like 90% plus of everything is so one-sided that it's just crazy how locked down the control over information is from what I've seen lately. Like, I don't know. Like, it just, even if you're skeptical against all of this, you're going to basically be challenged right off the bat by people that just buy into the propaganda. And it's sad that it's gotten to that point to me. Like, it's something that's been the case for a while now, probably, but it just continues to get more extreme. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that too, where if you just do a regular Google search of anything, you're going to get leftist propaganda, right? You go on Yahoo's homepage, because I still have a Yahoo email account, and all it is bullshit that is leftist propaganda. It's just amazing how sort of successful the people that control information in this country have been at making everything, you have to believe this point of view or you're a bad person, basically. And most of it, like I say, is just nonsense that comes from the left. Primarily the left, in terms of a political spectrum. Oh, Polska Bob says we got no wrenches. We can't link. That's right. I forgot about that. I should probably make people moderators on this. There, Polska Bob, I made you a moderator. Those are the only people that can link, huh? I didn't think about that. They can actually do that in the comments or in the chat. One Fast Stack says, 1/3 of people up here will not get their kids jabbed. Well, they shouldn't. Kids aren't dying from the coronavirus at all. It's ridiculous to have children get these vaccinations. It's just absurd. You can't defend any sort of argument that says they have to do it. Again, they're going to get other people infected. Well, other people can be vaccinated. I mean, it's just so insane how far this has gone. In my opinion, I guess. Solitude's Prophet says, if things are like that in the largest democracy in the world, imagine in countries with more problematic institutions. Yeah, there are places that it's where, things are even crazier, but I don't think being a democracy is a very good defensive it's very good defense against craziness, because then all you have to do is get the mob basically riled up in the right way. And like I say, all you have to do is convince them that everybody that doesn't agree with this point of view is against science or is against, female equality or whatever. And all of a sudden you have what we have. So I'm not a big fan of democratic institutions, like I mentioned just a little while ago. I like a constitutional republic. I would go with a constitutional monarchy over a democracy personally, but not to pick on that particular word or in that comment or anything, but I don't know that our institutions, I think they've been pretty much corrupted. They used to work, but that was back before we moved toward a complete democracy, I think, in my opinion. One Fast Act says, people up here went full sheep. I can't even leave my house without a passport. That's sad. That's really sad. I'm sorry that you have to deal with that, man. I cannot go, One Fast Stack also says, I cannot go to any public place, no funerals, no grocery store, no movie theaters, no restaurants. That's just crazy. Red Mind Man says, don't use Chrome, use Brave. Use DuckDuckGo for search. Don't use Gmail, use Proton Mail. There are alternatives. We need to stop building our prison. I have a question for you, Red Mind Man. If you do these sort of searches for things like feminism or MGTOW or cultural Marxism or whatever, or stuff about the virus and the vaccine, if you use those other browsers and those other means to search the internet, do you not have those incredibly biased results? Is it more, this is just what's on the internet and there's no effort to sort them in any sort of biased or propagandized way, like, because it could just be, you know, I use Chrome and stuff. It could just be that because they're a leftist, you know, the Alphabet Corporation is a leftist machine, basically. It could just be that it's only because of those particular services that I use. If you don't get results that are that biased using other search engines and stuff. One Fast Stack says I'll mod you. Yeah, okay, I'll add you as well on here. One Fast Stack, and I'll add Red Mind Man as well, just to give them the ability to share that information if they want to put a link or something on there on my chat. Red Mind Man says, I feel for you. It sounds like horrible up there. It does. It's worse than what it is in Ohio, for sure. In Ohio, there's still enough resistance against it. The majority of people have decided to close their eyes and not think for themselves. But there's enough resistance. You know, I'd say it's probably 30% of people that are they're just not getting vaccinated. Some people, I do have friends and relatives that have told me about situations where people have lost their jobs for not getting vaccinated. But that's about as far as it goes, right? I don't foresee in Ohio, at least, not being able to go to grocery stores and restaurants and malls and stuff like that unless you're vaccinated. I don't think that they're going to be able to do that. But I could be wrong on that, right? They could just go ahead and do it and say, bite me. And then, you know, your more conservative or right-wing people won't do shit about it. It could happen that way, too. But it would, at the very least, it would make a lot of people, a significant percentage of people, really mad. So I don't think it's going to get that bad here. It sucks that in Alberta that's the way things stand. Red Mind Man says, I don't see propagandization nearly as much using the alternatives, but occasionally I have had to use Google and it's dramatically worse. Okay. I'm going to have to sort of transition over into using different browsers and stuff. Obviously, I'm still going to use YouTube for streaming and whatnot for as long as I can. I shouldn't say obviously. I mean, I have choices on that too, probably, but I think I am going to start to use DuckDuckGo and some other browsers like the Brave browser or something as an alternative, because it just sickens me that everything is clearly being picked in order to, picked out in order to basically screw with people, right? It's clear that it's not, the internet is not as free as it used to be. And like I say, the elites really have control over the flow of information to the extent that most people just, they're fucked up. I mean, it's just like, if you're not actively trying to think for yourself, you're just going to believe whatever the pro-government, leftist narrative is now. And it's just sad that there's not any sort of really an ability for people that don't want to put in the effort to actually realize that there's an alternative, right? They don't even realize that, no, you're not stupid if you choose not to get vaccinated, or you're not stupid if you think that the situation sucks for men in terms of marriage, or, if you're not a feminist and you oppose feminism, you're actually correct, right? You're actually on the side of what's right. But if you look anything up on MGTOW or feminism or men's rights, you're going to see just the opposite, at least with Chrome, right? At least with Probably, I imagine, Internet Explorer and stuff like that, or Microsoft Edge, I think it is now, is the main Windows browser. I'm sure it would be the same way. But, you know. Unfortunately, it's just people, unless they really dig, they're not going to find alternative viewpoints. And they're just going to think that everybody that doesn't share what they're taught to believe is somehow wrong, right? It's like, it's hard to reach people given the amount of control that those that already have most of the wealth and power in our society, the control that they have over the flow of information. Red Mind Man says, and don't forget a VPN. Proton Mail is building out a really effective suite of programs. I might have to check some of that out and kind of like try them out one by one maybe and see how that affects things. See if that's better. Well, guys, I just kind of wanted to see that my audio was working properly again. Like I say, on Reverend 20 Pieces last stream, I think what happened was because I was just surfing the net and kind of doing other things, and no, I wasn't watching pornography. But because my computer is kind of older, it's an older laptop, and because the computer had been on for a while and I've been doing things kind of waiting for the stream to start, I think that it just sort of overheated and it got sluggish. And I just thought, well, I'll just join the stream anyway. As long as it can connect, it should be all right. And it wasn't. I think it was totally on my end where my laptop kind of crapped out. But that's okay. I'll have to make sure not to do that the next time if I'm on a stream. But I do think it was totally on my end for why my audio wasn't working then, because I didn't have to change any settings, and it's working okay now. So Eddie Migtaff says, I think they call it internalized misogyny if you question girl power movement. Yeah. Especially, I think that's used for other women, right? For women that challenge feminism, they'll say, well, it's internalized misogyny. In other words, you hate yourself. And then they'll go on about how feminism is really about equality and all this stuff that's very easy to disprove, right? From the very beginning, feminism's not been about equality because first wave feminism didn't push for women to have any sort of obligation to vote in order to be able to vote, right? So that's not equality if men have to register for the selective service. So right off the bat, you can prove that it's not about equality. And from that point on, it's always been about special rights and privileges. But, like I say, if you use the information that you're given and don't think for yourself outside of that and don't question it and don't think, well, wait a second, does that actually make sense? Then you're probably going to end up supporting feminism, thinking that you just support equal rights for women or whatever. Polska Bob says, Southside Chicago don't take no shit from Texas. Yeah. Southside Chicago is not a good place to be. I hope that you're not in that neighborhood, Polska Bob, or if that you are, that you have a way to keep yourself protected. I have been to Chicago a few times over the last few years, and yeah, I stay out of that neighborhood pretty much. Solitudus Prophet says they have hijacked science in a way that makes it impossible to debate anything. Yeah, I mean, science is whatever they want it to be, right? Ben, I could probably do a video just on that, but the way that it's been hijacked, in my interpretation of it, is basically they control the scientific elite, right? The so-called scientific community doesn't really do science anymore. They just make arguments based on authority. They make arguments based on so-called, supposed expertise. but they're not actually using the scientific method. And so you have these scientists that come out and say basically what the left wants them to say, and then they have that sort of, what do I want to say, aura of expertise that goes with that, but they're not actually saying, okay, here's our experiment, or here's our hypothesis that's based on this theory, and then we do an experiment, and here's the data. They're not doing that, right? They're just saying you have to believe this or you're not on the side of science. So they own the scientific community now. And for the people that don't actually understand what science is, that science is effectively the scientific method, right? That's what science really is. It's all about the method involved. If they don't understand that, they're going to believe whatever the so-called scientific experts say, even if they're not actually doing science. Just to give a little comment on that topic. Pulse Kebab says the audio sounds great. That's good to hear. If it's been good throughout this whole stream, then, like I say, the problem was me basically having my laptop worn out before the stream even started. So, and again, I noticed that it was lagging, and I just didn't think it would matter once I got connected to it, and it did. It was basically, it made it to where I couldn't communicate. Reverend 20p says, to me, no worries, brother, we'll have to catch up on another stream soon. Maybe get one fast stack and Red Mind Man on too. That would be great. Yep, that would be great. Pulse Kebab says, I'm in by Midway Airport. We're okay here, but you get shooting here and there. Yeah. When I stayed in Chicago a few times, like I say recently, I usually stayed out near O'Hare. So, that was a long ways from anything that was a bad neighborhood, really. At least that was my impression, so. One Fast Stack and Red Mind Man both say that they would be interested in that stream. That would be cool. I would do that for sure. Solitude as Prophet says, exactly. If you can't question or doubt something, it's the death of science. Right. I mean, it violates what the scientific method actually is. That's what science is, right? It's actually fairly easy to evaluate whether something is from a scientific point of view or not, because you can just look at whether they're actually using the scientific method. It's like, okay, do they have a hypothesis? Are they testing that? Are they actually using data? Or are they just saying you have to believe this? Right? That's the difference between using science and not using science. But a lot of people, they think that the scientific community is science itself. They don't see the difference between those things. And once you get to that point where a lot of people just listen to what the scientific community says, and they portray that as being science, then science is effectively not very good anymore. Which, by the way, that could be another example of what I was saying about people making arguments about beliefs that you don't have, right? People could actually say, well, you scientists, all you are is a political machine, or all you are is a, representation of what the left wants. Someone that has more, like I say, of a kind of a religious background or something, they could just point and laugh and say, this is what science really is. Science isn't valid. It's like, no, that's not my position on science. That's not how I use science. So therefore, I don't care about what these other so-called scientific people are doing, right? It's just to point out another example of that. There are so many cases where that can be used to try to get you to defend other people's point of views that you don't agree with. And that's just one more case where it's like people can try to get you to defend these scientific quacks or scientists that really don't use science, these people that, are basically just part of the political movement on the left. That doesn't have anything to do with the validity of the scientific method, though. But that's another example of how people can kind of, if you saw that part of the stream, that they can kind of try to make a fallacious argument against you and waste your time defending some of that crap. Reverend 20 Piece on Polska Bob says, most of the shootings are in gang-controlled areas of the southeast side, west side. I'm on the southwest side, right? Completely different cultures, right? That's good that you're not part of those really bad areas on the south and southeast. I think even into like Gary, Indiana and stuff like that's pretty bad too, from my understanding of it. I kind of got somewhat of an impression of where the bad neighborhoods were there. But it's good that you're not in one of the really bad areas. Reverend 20 Piece says, sounds good. Sometime after Thanksgiving and before Christmas, I'll be in touch. That should be a good stream. With Red Mind Man and One Fast Act. That would be good. Red Mind Man says science is used as an authoritarian bludgeon to quell critical thought, and well, science. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's ironic how they can use that, but why not? It works for, every other sort of challenge that they face, so why couldn't it work against science itself, right? It's like any sort of critical thought to some extent is going to probably involve science at some point or another, right? Because it involves gathering evidence and data. Not necessarily in every case, but it's very similar to just thinking for yourself using science, right? It's one of the ways in which you can think for yourself, and so the elites have to silence all of that in order to maintain the control over the narrative, regardless of whether you're looking at women's issues or, the virus stuff or whatever. And just, science itself becomes a victim, and its corpse is used to kind of, through the so-called scientific experts to continue to tell people that they have to think a certain way. It's ironic, but it works. And unfortunately, I can see it working every day, right? Their plan to do that, or their efforts, to do that, has worked, right? It's like science is whatever the government, and in particular the leftist establishment, tells you that you're supposed to believe. That's scientific now, unfortunately. Polska Bob also says the further southeast you go, the worse it gets all the way into Gary. Yeah. Reverend 20 CP says Calumet City is nice. I think I stopped for gas there once. I know it's not really relevant, but that is kind of in the same area, though, isn't it? Of some of the bad neighborhoods. I don't know if that area is that good either, Rev. Maybe it's okay. I don't know. Solitude is profit. Says you're right. They just traded places with the religious totalitarians of the past. Instead of using religion as an excuse for oppression, they use science. Yeah. I mean, I made a comment on the YouTube studio feature where you can go in and make a post. I think the last one that I made, and most people don't read posts, but I basically said that I commented that it's ironic that in the 15th and 16th centuries, when it was science and using the scientific method that was challenging the church's view on many different things, whether it's the sun or the earth being the center of the solar system, or any other scientific findings, the scientists of that time challenge the elites that basically were run through the church, right? The church basically, and I'm a Christian. I'm not putting down religion totally, because that wouldn't make sense for me to do, but I recognize that the church was under the control of the elites, and they were trying to control the flow of information and tell people what to believe, even though it was all BS, or a lot of it was. And then you had the scientists that were speaking out, Galileo, Copernicus, that were, saying, no, we don't think this is true. And they were the ones that were on the sort of cutting edge, right? They were the ones that were challenging the status quo. And now, today, the so-called scientific community is protecting the status quo, and they're part of the status quo. It's the complete opposite, right? The people that are challenging it have to challenge the so-called scientists as well. And now the elites control the government, but, I'd like to say that religion is on the other side challenging things now, but in a lot of cases that's really not what I'm seeing, right? A lot of them are traditional conservatives, and they're just kind of putting their head down in the sand and talking about, unfortunately, how, instead of being any sort of voice against this, they kind of they're afraid. And I understand why, right? But at least in terms of the scientific community being on the other side, it's pretty ironic that the group of people that spoke out 500 years ago or more, they're now the ones that are part of the problem. But that's just the way it goes, I guess, unfortunately. Red Mind Man says, got to get some shut-eye, enjoyable chats. Well, thanks for joining the stream, man. I'll continue to check out a lot of the videos on your channel, because I do like your content. You remind me of Mountain MGTOW. I don't know if Mountain MGTOW is still making videos or not, but kind of your style and delivery there. Well, guys, like I say, I just sort of wanted to get on here and test my audio and talk about what had been on my mind sort of lately, about how in the past, for myself, I've tried to defend other people's points of view, or, I've tried to say, well, MGTOW's not really about hating women, and these guys that hate women, they're blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, right? To really have a conversation with someone and to discuss issues or even have a debate, it has to be about your beliefs and your values and what you hold as a position, right? What it is that you think is true. And to try to defend other people because they may have some similar beliefs to yours, when you don't really, you're not really of a certain mindset, right? You don't agree with the particular point that's being made. All you have to do is say, well, that's not what I believe. I don't hate women. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, right? I'm not someone that believes everything that Trump says. That's another thing you'd hear from a political point of view, right? Is, well, you voted for Trump, so you must agree with everything he says, and he lied about this and that. I don't care. I didn't lie about that, and I don't agree with contradicting yourself, or I don't agree if Trump said this, then that's not true, right? But I'm not going to sit here and defend it because that has nothing to do with my personal belief system or what I think on this issue or the other. And so I've kind of learned people have to really be willing to stick with actually comparing your view with theirs rather than trying to go into somebody else's views or talk about another group of people. Who cares? Who cares what other people think? If you're having a conversation with someone, then it's about your personal views, right? And I think you got to challenge people to think for themselves and to have that discussion on that level, or they can just not talk to you about stuff, right? That kind of can end it right there if they're not willing to have a conversation about your actual views versus theirs. If they're trying to bring in other things and trying to get you to defend, well, this MGTOW guy said this, or this guy was red-pilled and he was all just about banging as many women as he could, right? He was a PUA. I don't care. I'm not a PUA, so that doesn't have any relevance to me. I think it's important to keep that sort of thing in the back of your mind if people try to get you to associate with things that you don't really believe in or agree with. So that was just the point that I wanted to make. I'm glad my audio worked for this stream, and if there's anything else that anybody wants to say that would like for me to comment on or wants to make a comment on before I hang it up for the night, now is the time to do so. If I do, or when I do live streams in the future on my own, I will try to remember to make a notification or, put something on YouTube that says what time the stream's going to be. But like I say, for this, I really just wanted to mainly test my audio. I didn't know whether it was going to work to begin with. I might have come on here and it might have been like, we can't hear you, Dan. We don't know what the heck you're talking about. Solitude as Prophet says, the attempt to control people that this elite makes, is it human nature? Yes, I think it pretty much is. I think it's nature because people want to control resources. People want to have power, right? That comes from a desire to have enough resources. You can look at women in hypergamy if you know what that entails. But also men, right? You're measured by how much you can do, how much you can gather in terms of power and resources. That's kind of how you're reproductively successful. So yes, I do think it's human nature. I think that any class of elites, they're going to want more power. They're going to want to at least to a large extent, they're going to want to control as much as they can. You could argue whether it goes past a certain level where there's more like a conscious evil, which I think kind of does exist as well with what's going on, where if the people that have power in our society that control this flow of information, as I've discussed here, if they get their way, they're going to enslave everybody. I mean, they would if they could. But is that part of human nature to go that far with it? Probably. I mean, you can pretty much run it back to the attempt to have as much resources and wealth as possible. For men, that gives you selection to more mates, and for women, that means that you can be better taken care of. So, yeah, I do think it comes down to human nature. I think that it would be great if we actually had the capacity to fight that morally, right, with our conscious mind, with our rational mind. But most people, a lot of them, they just want more power. They don't care. There is no control over that. So I think a lot of it does come back to human nature, unfortunately. Successful endeavors. Nice to see you. I'm kind of in the process of wrapping the stream up, though. Kind of getting any last comments that people wanted to have for the video. Hold on, I think SCE is coming over here. I sent him a link. Hope he gets here soon. Oh, okay. Yeah, he actually left a comment before that. Reverend 20p says, appreciate the stream, Dan. Yeah, like I say, Rev, I'm sorry that my audio didn't work out too well on that Veterans Day stream. To be honest, I kind of wanted to hear, since I'm not a vet, I kind of wanted to hear more of what other men had to say on there. I wasn't going to really say a whole lot anyway. But it sucks that when I tried that I couldn't communicate. But like I said, that was on my end. Successful Endeavors says, duality reality is the best wrench out there. And thank you. Yeah, no problem, man. I know that you're a contributor to the community. I've seen you on a lot of different channels, of course, so no problem. Solitude as Prophet says, so we're screwed because the elite behind the politicians have the power to control our entire lives. Yeah, I mean, up to a point. I don't want to be super pessimistic, but I do think that we're at a point now where they've gamed the system, right? The elites pretty much have control over information now. They have control over what people believe is true or not true. But I do think there'll be a significant percentage of the population, especially in the United States, that resists that. But a lot of it has been set up, like Pulse Kebab, I think, was saying, and others. Once you have the family unit pretty much destroyed, and you just have, generations raised by single moms that can't think for themselves, like, this is all part of their plan, right? They know that if they break down a lot of these different institutions and a lot of these different sort of some of these foundational fabrics of our society, that eventually you can control people. But the problem is, what do you have left? There are those that say that, and I'm getting kind of off topic. I know I'm trying to wrap the stream up, but there are those that say that the elites are going to take control over everything and it's going to stay that way, like a 1984 type of scenario. I don't think so. I think they'll go after each other, and I think people will quit on the system, and eventually that leads to the doom of your society. So I think it's more of just going to be a long decline, and eventually we get replaced by something else in terms of having a new society. I hope that it's functional, right? I hope that it's something that still has Western values involved, but I don't know, right? It's just like, or we could get conquered by China. I hope that that's not the case, but I think people need to prepare for things to continue to go downhill, even if you never reach a point where literally 100% of the information is controlled by the elites. We're still past a point where too much of it is. So, Pulse Kebab says, fun stuff, Dan. Thanks for jumping on. We're all kind of live stream proper garden tools because we don't get paid. No, I appreciate you guys being on my channel, though. I'm glad you guys thought it was of value to check it out. Check out the stream. One Fast Stack says good health is the key for sure. That's important, yep. Brian Banner says so many damaged people, feels like a downward spiral. Yeah, it's pretty much been set out that way on purpose, I think, to a large extent. Successful Endeavor says, watch out for the upcoming new smallpox threat. Did they ever develop any sort of vaccine for smallpox? Or is that something that just ran its way out of the population eventually? I'm not sure whether people developed an actual herd immunity to smallpox or whether there's actually a vaccine. Because we're probably not immune to it anymore, if that's the case. Pulse Kebab says, no way, their time is coming, Dan. The 0.00001%. They can't hide anymore. Yeah, they have a lot of control, though. Brian Banner says, China doesn't have the strength to do much more than commerce. I agree. I think it's unlikely that we actually get conquered by China. I just said that as a possible alternative, but it's not really in their interest to do that. All they have to do, if they want to conquer, is to stop paying interest on our debt, and now we die. I mean, that's really all they need to do in order to beat us. There's no real reason for them to actually go to war, I don't think. One Fast Stack says, we appreciate you, Dan. I appreciate your videos, Dak. Like a lot of people, I think I appreciate how you gave us updates on Vention toward his last few weeks there. Because not very many other people other than you and Hammerham were giving us any information. And Monger, of course, MGTOW Monger, who Vention was pretty good friends with. None of them were giving us any information. Nobody other than you guys was giving us information about what was going on with Vention. So I watched some of those videos that you did with updates. That's when I subscribed to your channel. But I appreciate the content you've done after that. Like, I've watched a lot of your daily videos and stuff, so I'm glad that I found your channel. It sucks that Vincent passed away and everything, and kind of suffered for a while the way that he did, but I'm glad that I found your channel, even if it was a result of all that kind of stuff. Solitude as Prophet says, I agree, they'll have the power for a while, but it's unsustainable. It is. And I don't think they realize that. A lot of people, to finish the point that I was trying to make with that, a lot of guys, even, guys in the manosphere or guys who are pretty politically aware of what's going on, they think that there's like a master plan and that they're going to hold on to all their power. I think they're just power hungry, right? I don't think they have a plan. They just want to take people's rights away, and using this sort of Marxist totalitarian framework, control, destroying the family unit, that may get them the power they want for a period of time, but they're not going to be able to sustain it. I kind of think that they're not planning ahead of time for what they're going to do if they reach that point. Let's see. Successful Endeavor says, Ohio Dan, could you please leave an email link sometime? Just for like how to get in touch with me, basically. I can do that. But it's basically, the email that I use is just ohiodan@gmail. So I could put that on my profile, but I think that that's really the best email to reach me at, and it's just my profile name at Gmail. So One Fast Stack says, thank you, Dan. Vincent was the main reason I started it. He was a great man. I miss him. Yeah, man, I watched his content for years. I was actually thinking some of these storms that had hit kind of the northwest United States and Canada, British Columbia and that area. I was thinking, man, if Vincent was still around, he'd probably be dealing with the floods and the mudslides and stuff like that in Washington State. But that's one thing he doesn't have to deal with anymore, is our problems down here. But yeah, I think of him fairly often, and some of the content that he produced. We're going to miss his stuff, right? We're going to miss his laugh and some of the stuff. I don't want to get too emotional into that, but yeah, it still sucks that he's passed away, but at least he doesn't have to deal with the cancer and stuff anymore. Brian Banner says, I do believe this virus to be a weaponized tool of the next generation warfare, though. Maybe. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation and question marks as far as how this started, but it does look to me like it was created on purpose. Well, it looks to me like it was created artificially. We'll say that. It was created in a lab, most likely. That's another one of those things where, right, the elites didn't want that information to get out, and it kind of has anyway. So that's one of the few things that they didn't control successfully. Reverend 20p says, gents, I'm going to re-listen to this tomorrow. You all have a good night. Have a good night, man. I don't know, you might get bored re-listening to this. I had some long pauses there trying to catch up on some of the stuff that I was looking up, like when Rome officially collapsed and all that. But thanks for your participation as always, Rev. I appreciate seeing you on here. Well, guys, like I say, I just wanted to make a stream here, test my audio out, make comments on a few things like I have. So thanks for everyone for checking it out, and hope you guys have a good night wherever you are. And hopefully it doesn't, the winter weather is not too extreme for us here yet, but better get ready for it if you're in Canada, if you're in Alberta. you're going to get hit with this probably pretty often with different snowstorms. But like I say, guys, I thank you all for checking out the stream, and I hope you guys have a good night and a good weekend coming up. Thanks, guys.